Our topic today is how to save money on your grocery bill. And my guest is Tiffany Terzak, who runs the wildly popular Grocery Budget Boot Camp for people who want to save big bucks at the grocery store. Tiffany, great to see you. Thanks for being here.
Absolutely. Happy to be here.
And also, we should mention that you are the author of a very popular blog called Don't Waste the Crumbs. And so you have lots of advice about how to save lots and lots of money on groceries. Can you give us some examples of how much money people can save?
Yes. So the vast majority of my students save on average $300 before the course is over. And depending on your level of experience, I've had some students save upwards of $1,000 to $1,300 off of their grocery budget.
And now this is all coming, it all started from personal experience when you yourself had a real life situation and you needed to really tighten the belt and save money yourself, and you came up with all these great ideas. Talk about your own personal experience with saving money at the grocery store.
Sure. My husband and I were in six figures worth of debt when we first got married. And fast forward, we tried the whole coupon thing. We added babies to the mix, and we were just really, really struggling with making it all work. But the numbers weren't adding up. And we realized that the one spot in our household budget that we could actually save money was the grocery budget. And so we capped our spending. And as I mentioned, we did the whole coupon thing. But then we started leaning more towards healthy eating and not so much of processed food eating and from boxes and such. And that threw a real wrench into the mix. And so rather than spending my time using coupons and trying things that were really only working for processed food, I just spent a lot of time in the grocery store. I tried to figure out where the grocery stores, like their marketing tactics, what did they do to make us as a consumer spend more money? And then I reverse engineered that. And as you mentioned, came up with some really proven techniques. And then not just the techniques themselves, but if you kind of rearrange them a little bit, it turns into a system that you can follow from point A to point B. And then you essentially rinse and repeat every single week. And thanks to that system, we were able to pay off our debt. We built up an emergency fund. And then several years later, we bought our first home and paid cash. And then just not too long ago, we sold that home and reinvested what we had made, plus a little bit extra from our savings, and we bought a farm. So, we're proof positive that saving money on groceries can happen even with rising food costs and inflation. And it's not just, $5 here, $5 there. It's significant savings.
And you are a woman of very strong Christian faith. You help so many people save money. Do you consider that a ministry?
I do. I firmly believe, and scripture says that every Christian at conversion is given a set of gifts. And I believe, and it's going to sound funny, but I think one of my gifts is efficiency and being able to take what you have and turn it into something. And I have a love for food. And so I took that gift and I applied it to the food realm and started the blog, Don't Waste the Crumbs. And we're publishing multiple times a week free recipes and meal plans, and then a lot of the experience that I learned inside the grocery store, we're putting that up on the blog as well in terms of shopping tips and shopping hacks. And it's really my desire to help families make real food affordable. And I know that families come from all different sorts of backgrounds. And so my goal is just, even if I'm able to help just a little bit, to give them some hope that, because it's not an easy road. There's effort required in order to make it happen. But if I can make it easier on them, then, that's my mission right there.
Right. And, effort is not that big of a deal. We think about, you can save money if you clean your home rather than paying somebody to do it, or, fix things at home or do you work on your car yourself rather than pay somebody to do it. So it's definitely a little bit more time invested and, you know, a little bit of work and knowledge, but that's a great way to save. And we do that across the board in other areas of our lives too. But really, it seems like once you kind of get these basic things down, when you learn the techniques, then it's sort of rote after that point. You don't have to think about it that much, right?
Absolutely. A large portion of it becomes autopilot. There's a couple of things that we built into the system, kind of like a safety check, so to speak, where every few months you check in on yourself just to make sure that you haven't fallen back on some of those old habits. But then also you can revisit it and tweak it if you need to, because eating real food on a budget isn't like there's not a finish line to this goal. It's something we do for the rest of our lives because our lives are constantly changing. We add babies, we lose loved ones, we move, we relocate, different jobs, our schedules change. And so that all impacts how we shop and how we eat and how we plan. Like even with the regular school year, if anybody has kids, that when you're in the throes of sports season, that's a very different schedule than 2 weeks before school starts. So a lot of the principles, you just, like you said, it goes on autopilot, rinse and repeat. But I do recommend checking in on yourself every now and then and revisiting to make sure that you are doing the best you can in all those different seasons of life.
So there are literally hundreds of different tips that you offer all the time. And so we don't have time to go through them, but let's talk about the big ones. Like
Yes.
if you had, if you met somebody on a plane and they were like, how can I save money on my grocery budget? What would be the first thing you tell them?
It's so funny because I had someone ask me that exact same question, and I told them to eat the food you have. My husband and I did an experiment a few years ago. I opened a cabinet and I was like, oh my gosh, we have nothing to eat. And then, as well as I know, that's not true. We had plenty of things to eat. And he challenged me, do you think we can go a week without going to the grocery store? And I said, okay, sure. A little bit of trepidation, right? A little tiny step of faith there. Well, we ended up going 33 days without going to the grocery store. And so my very first tip is to eat the food you already have, because we have a lot more food than we think we do.
In the pantry, in the
Yes.
freezer,
Yes.
in the garage. So you're
Yes,
saying just
all the
eat
places.
eat the food that you already have in your house. That's probably going to last you for a long time. Okay,
Yes.
one caveat. I just have to ask the question because sometimes I get nervous that I don't have enough food in the house. Like, what if there's a hurricane, or what if I have to? I always. So you're saying that really not to have a lot of food standing by, but what if there's some sort of a disaster and you can't get to the store?
Right. So over the years, I think this kind of should be built into where you live. If you live in like Florida and you're prone to hurricanes, then you should absolutely have a stash of food, water, medical supplies that will get you through shutdowns, earthquakes, tornadoes, all the natural disasters. And as we've experienced not too long ago, not being able to go to the grocery store. But I also think there should be some realistic expectations there. If you live in a hurricane zone, more often than not, you want to ask yourself, how long am I really truly going to be without power? Am I going to be without refrigeration? So how can I plan for those days? And if that's a 1 week for you, if that's a comfortable zone, then by all means do that. But it also means after 1 week, we don't necessarily need to have 3, 4, 5 months worth of things on hand. And I say that very broadly because there are some families who do. And if you can rotate through that in order to not waste food, because that's a huge deal too,
Yeah.
then by all means. But for the average American family, it's really hard to keep up with that type of quantity of food. So I definitely think you should be prepared, but I also think we should be realistic on how much food we generally have on hand.
Right, right. I'm thinking of how much food I have in my house right now. I need to eat that before going to the grocery store. All right, this is great information. We're going to take a break and be right back with Tiffany Terzak. She runs Grocery Budget Boot Camp, and she's going to give us lots of tips on how to save money on our grocery bill when we come back. Welcome back. We're talking with Tiffany Terzak, author of the popular blog Don't Waste the Crumbs, about ways to save money on the grocery budget. So you said eat the food you have. What would be sort of like your number 2 tip?
My number 2 tip is to meal plan. And I think when people hear that, there's a lot of mumbling and groaning because meal planning seems to be this elusive skill. And I'm going to break it down really simple. It's literally think of what you're going to eat based on what you already have and write it down on paper. And that is meal planning. It does not have to be any more complicated than that. You don't even have to make meal plans for a full week if you don't want to. But just knowing that what you're going to have tonight for dinner, maybe tomorrow for breakfast, and that you already have those ingredients on hand is such a huge stress relief. It really frees up some brain space for you. But it also means that you don't have to go to the grocery store. So therefore, you're not spending money out of pocket. But then it also goes back to tip number 1, you're eating the food you have, which would by default mean you're avoiding food waste, which is another fantastic way to save money.
Eat what you have, plan your meals. What's number 3?
Number 3 is to shop strategically. And I go in depth in this in my course, Grocery Budget Bootcamp. But really, truly, you want to be the very best shopper you possibly can. You don't like what we don't want to do is walk into the store and haphazardly throw things into our carts. We have to remember that the grocery store wants us to spend money. So if we're looking to save money, we have to be proactive in how we approach our shopping trips. We're talking about making a shopping list and double checking, triple checking that shopping list. When we get into the store, we are sticking to that list. We're possibly even making substitutions on the fly. For example, if you find if you needed lettuce, but it turns out the lettuce is not on sale like you thought it would be, learning how to substitute for that lettuce instead, maybe a different ingredient, or possibly even a different meal than you had originally planned. So you really want to be a smart shopper.
So talk about sales at the grocery store. For example, I buy these certain types of protein bars and they're really expensive, but every once in a while they go on sale and they're non-perishable, so I can get as many as I want. So I try to wait until they go on sale and then buy enough to hold me over until the next time they go on sale. But I can't figure out when they go on sale.
Right.
Like how often do stores put stuff on sale?
Yeah, so historically, it's called a sales cycle. The sales cycle has been anywhere from 6 to 8 weeks. Now, post 2020, the sales cycle has been a little bit longer for various reasons that we've all experienced. So it's anywhere from 10 to 12 weeks. So depending on the item, and this is where it's really different because things like almond milk I'll see on sale pretty frequently, but like your protein bars, depending on the supply chain, depending on transportation, you may not see that on sale for another 10 to 12 weeks. So I would really pay attention to those sales and see if you can notice a trend. And that's going to be the biggest giveaway.
And so when you see something that you will be eating and it's on sale, buy it up, right? And even and you can even do that for perishable things like meat, right?
Absolutely. I'm a huge proponent of buying meat when it's at, I call it the rock bottom price, which is essentially the price that you've never seen it this low before. Well, you have because we're tracking prices, but there's a bottom price point, and we buy enough so that when it's on sale again in the next 6, 8, 12 weeks, we don't have to buy it again. We have enough to get us through.
So do you recommend people look at the circulars on Wednesday or whenever? I mean, to find out what's on sale where? Are sales really important?
They are important. I think when we approach sales, we're kind of expecting a pre-2020 sale cycle. And honestly, the grocery arena has changed significantly in the past few years. And so sales are still very, very important. A lot of people are writing them off, thinking because of inflation, because of who knows what issue, they're not important anymore. But the fact is that they're more important now than ever because food prices are going up, and it is harder to squeeze more into your grocery cart with the same amount of money. But paying attention to those sales is absolutely crucial.
So what else besides the strategic shopping? What would you talk about as far as saving money on your grocery bill?
Yeah. So, okay. Number one, we talked about eating what you have, meal planning, strategic shopping. My next tip would be to keep your kitchen organized, which isn't something that a lot of people think of. But every time I share this tip with my students, I share a funny example. And it's kind of like who gets bragging rights this week on the most jars of something. And what I mean by that is we'll go to the grocery store and say, oh, I need a bottle of hot sauce. And so we pick up that bottle of hot sauce and we put it in the pantry. And then we realize we already had
Ah,
5 bottles of hot sauce in the pantry. And so if you can keep your kitchen organized, and I like to use the phrase, everything has a home. It has one home. There's a spot for your hot sauce, right? And if we can keep our kitchen organized, then we reduce the chance effect of buying something that we simply don't need. And then that backs up again into eating what we have and preventing food waste at the same time.
yes, I have experienced that too. I do that especially with spices. It's like I'll buy a really
Yes.
expensive spice and come home and say, "Oh no, I already have it." So I just
Yes.
broke down and I alphabetized all my spices. So if I was in your class, would I get points for that?
All the bragging rights, yes.
All right. We're going to take another break and be right back with Tiffany Turzak. She has the popular blog, Don't Waste the Crumbs. Stay with us. And we're talking with Tiffany Turzak about grocery budget boot camp, which she runs. And boy, you've been giving us some great tips, but I know that this just barely scratches the surface.
Yes.
Talk about the importance of buying non-grocery things like aluminum foil somewhere other than the grocery store.
Yeah. So this concept of convenience where the grocery store has non-food items, and even the like a Walmart where has a warehouse store is also now including food, is really a new phenomenon in the grocery world. And it's all based on convenience. The grocery stores want you to spend more money there, and it's just convenient to buy your paper plates and aluminum foil and storage bags there. But I highly recommend shopping around. There's 9 times out of 10, you're going to find a better deal on typical household items related to the kitchen, but that are not food somewhere else other than the grocery store.
And so, speaking of grocery stores, is there one store in particular that's just like so much cheaper? I'm thinking, is it worth it to have a Costco membership, or should you shop at Walmart? Is Walmart a lot cheaper than Kroger? We know Whole Foods is probably the most expensive, right?
Right? Well, I can tell you, Lori, that I created my system when we lived in California, and we spent 8 years there. We then moved to Atlanta, Georgia, spent 7 years there. And as you mentioned, we're now in South Carolina, and we haven't been here for nearly that long. But what I have learned, and we've also traveled all over the US, is that the best deal is completely dependent on where you live. When I was in Atlanta, hands down, my most affordable store was Walmart. So when I moved here to South Carolina, that's what I did. I went to Walmart, but I quickly learned that Walmart is not the best deal here. In fact, it's one of the most expensive options here. And in California, the most affordable store were smaller discount grocery stores that are very specific just to the West Coast.
Some of the stores that honestly have better prices, their produce is awful, so I don't go there. Do you
Yes.
recommend going to, like, buying certain things at certain stores and certain things at other stores?
If that's what your experience is in your area, then absolutely. I can attest that there's a store in my area that has awful produce, and so I just don't buy produce items there. I'm happy to buy some pantry staples from there and some things that I know that they have the best deal on, but I'm very strategic so that I don't have to go to that store every week. I wait until I have enough items in my that particular store shopping list, so to say, and then when I have enough, I'll go to that store, make a visit, and then purchase enough so that I don't have to go again for another month or two. But if your stores are relatively close by, then absolutely go to multiple stores to get the best deal you can.
And we really didn't talk about fast food or buying food that's already been prepared. But isn't that one of the main sort of foundations of what you teach is to cook at home?
Yes, absolutely. There's a whole lesson in my course dedicated to cooking from scratch. Not in the sense of I'm going to teach you how to do it, because you can Google all kinds of recipes. But my goal is to help you cook from scratch when it counts. So we actually take recipes, break them down to how much does it cost to make this recipe at home, both in monetary value, but also time and energy, because there will be instances where it's cheaper to buy something than it is to make it. But there's also plenty instances where it's cheaper to make it instead of buy it. And so it really just depends on your food preferences and your dietary needs, as well as what's available to you at your grocery stores.
Yeah. All right, we're going to take one final break and be right back with Tiffany Terzak talking about how to save money on your grocery bill. Stay tuned. We're talking with Tiffany Terzak about how to save money on your grocery bill. And boy, we just really scratched the surface here. There's so many things. Talked to our viewers about how people can learn more about you and Grocery Budget Bootcamp. There are 3 different levels, right, that people can sign up for, but then your blog is free.
Absolutely. My blog is free to everybody. If your budget is too high and there's no wiggle room in funds, please go to the blog. Don'twastethecrumbs.com. Years and years and years of recipes, meal plans, and grocery tips to help anybody at every level.
And what are some of your favorite recipes that you like people to do? I know you have dozens of them, hundreds of them, really.
Yes, my favorite ones is I really love the no knead artisan overnight bread. You don't even need it. You kind of halfway stir it in a bowl and you've got a beautiful loaf of bread the next day. I also really like my slow cooker carnitas recipe. It's absolutely delicious. The house smells amazing. And then my homemade mayonnaise, which sounds very elusive, but it's ready in 2 minutes. Tastes so much better than anything you could buy at the store, and it's like $1 to make versus many dollars at the grocery store.
Right, mayonnaise can be very expensive. Well, you are an inspiration, Tiffany. Thank you so much. And it is a ministry. I agree with you. It's just blessing so many people. You have so many satisfied customers on your website who talked about all the hundreds of dollars that they've saved. So thank you so much for being here and for giving us some of these really valuable tips. We really appreciate your time and your expertise.